Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and welcome back to our Linux First Impressions. Today we're going to look at a different type of Linux operating system, but one of the oldest that's been out there. I have not done, I believe, a review on a Red Hat distribution before, and this is Scientific Linux version 6.5. Now, I will admit to you, out of the box, I was a wee bit disappointed. The only thing scientific about Scientific Linux is its background, with the molecules and such. Nothing else about Scientific Linux lends to it being scientific or having anything to do with any of the sciences or mathematics or anything else, sadly. And so I thought, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I don't have all the packages. And so I tried to get in there and see what I could find out to install. And that led me to another discovery that I was quite disappointed in. The packages in the application selection were quite minimal and lacked greatly. If we look at, and I changed the little dock here to Lancelot, unfortunately that brings me to point number 3. If I look at my Gentoo box and I check it real quick, and I should have thought of doing this beforehand, but you see if I can get in there real fast and I can take a quick look at something. I'm running Gentoo, of course, over here, and I've got whatever the latest stable packages that Gentoo repositories have allowed, and I believe that I am running pretty close to the most recent version of Gentoo here. I'm at 4.11.5 on my Gentoo box. And on this, if we were to open up something like Conqueror and bring that open just a wee bit more, go to Help and About KDE, we are running 4.3.4. And that is really disappointing. I understand that Red Hat's all about stability and keeping things as stable as possible for the user, but give me a break. 4.3.4? And the other thing is, it comes back kind of broken when you first install it. It says that you have the options for KDE and Gnome and I believe IceWM. If you take the default installation, and I had to install this I think 3 times because I had a dickens of a time with its installation media just not working correctly, and when I finally did get it installed, I think I pulled down the packages from the network, but I couldn't use their network install because it didn't work properly with my networking and wireless, etc. I had to use a live DVD and then tell it a repository from the internet, because it didn't matter how many times I burned the media or try to use a USB stick or anything else, it would fail. Now that's sad for somebody who states that they are so, stable and such. Moving on from that, once I installed it and got it running, it went into Gnome, and I saw that KDE was there. I saw IceWM. Now we are in KDE right now, but you couldn't log into those. The Gnome desktop manager was hosed in a way that it refused to allow you to change the desktop environment that you wanted to go into. So once I got rid of GDM and it forced itself to use KDM, the KDE desktop manager, then I had options to be able to choose whether I wanted to go into Gnome or KDE or not XF, but IceWM. Now another thing is, I believe they're using GNOME 2.3, and the last stable version of the 2.x series, I believe, was 2.6. So once again, old and archaic. Installing Scientific Linux really reminded me, after using such great products as the Gentoo versions, of kind of backtracking back to the old Windows XP days, how everything's kind of blocky and ugly looking and doesn't work quite right, and even the Lancelot desktop kicker here, doesn't work exactly right because it's an older version. All of it's kind of just wonky and ugly. I then tried to install GUVC Viewer. I failed miserably at that, so right now, as you see, I'm using Cheese. If you can't work with one application, Linux does have other applications to use. I tried to install SSR, Simple Screen Recorder, which is my favorite screen recorder. It would not work because the versions of Qt were old in the repository, out of date, and there was no way to successfully update them without bringing in third-party repositories that hosed other things. You fix one thing, break 3 other things, and that's what I don't like about tightly managed systems. One of the biggest complaints I had about this is I've heard people say, oh, well, yeah, there's third-party repositories. You can get into a third-party repository and install that with no issues. Yeah, I installed a few of the third-party repositories when I was first trying this out last week. I believe it was Friday night, Saturday last week, and I got Qt, the right version of it, the SSR wanted, and then it wanted, of course, FFmpeg and the things like that, which are not available in Scientific Linux. And okay, now I'm introducing third-party repositories on top of bringing in software that I need to compile in this system. Once I started trying to compile it, then of course the whole horribleness of Red Hat started rearing its ugly head about how they have completely screwed up the way Linux works in every other distribution, how they've changed the libraries, how they've changed locations of files and bin packages, and so my install was failing left and right because it couldn't find the right things to be able to utilize what it needed to set up and install and compile. And it's not SSR's fault. I have used SSR in every distribution I have tried, and this is the first time I've messed around with Red Hat, and sorely, sorely disappointed. Not surprised, but disappointed. And going back to applications here, they have the standard applications that you'll see, and that's just it. You have your normal stuff for administration. You have a few things here for development. It did come with some games. GIMP, of course, is in there. Comes with Firefox. Multimedia came with Cheese. I did finally get GDK record my desktop and Qt record my desktop because I didn't know which environment I might end up doing that in, so I got both of them there and record my desktop to work instead of SSR, which is what I'm using right now. And it comes with LibreOffice, but be warned, if you want to use Scientific Linux, it's not a scientific operating system. There were no scientific apps even installed by default. When you go to the repositories to install software, there's no scientific software to install. Now, you ask, well, what were you expecting, DOS? Well, I was expecting to be like algebraic applications that I've seen with scientific mathematics. I expected to see astronomy applications, physics applications. I expected to see chemistry applications. I expected to see space exploration type stuff on there. I have been on less qualified operating system distros that have showed me more science type applications than this distribution has. And did I tell you how much I was disappointed in this distro? Throw off the side, oh, but it's stable, oh, but it's secure. Yeah, who cares about a stable, secure operating system that you can't do anything in? And it really reminds me of when I first started with Red Hat way back when. And we're not even talking this century, we're talking last century. I remember how, number one, before Red Hat split off and became Enterprise Linux, and they were doing a lot for Just everybody, and I'm not bashing them on that. They found their niche in the business environment. Whether I agree with the directions that they go or not are irrelevant. But the whole point is they have not changed in 15 years. I remember installing Red Hat because it was the second or third distro that I ever looked at. I remember how, gee, why does it take 3 times longer to install from their CDs and things than it does any other distribution? And then when I'm done, nothing works because there aren't any codecs installed, there aren't any drivers to make anything work. It just bare bones barely works. And then I have to download 500 to 600 megs of applications and RPMs, and don't even get me started on the horribleness of their package management and how dependencies don't work and how you had to search for one. You'd finally find the application you wanted. You'd go to install it and it would come back after you tried to install it saying these dependencies aren't met. So then you go and you find those dependencies and you find that those dependencies have dependencies that aren't met. You know, ridiculously horrible. Now again, I'm talking from a 15-year-old memory. And honestly, from that, I've never really wanted to have anything to do with Red Hat again. You ask maybe, why did you look at Scientific Linux if all you're going to do is complain? I had a fellow in my last video review ask if I'd look at Scientific Linux, and I think he had the same idea, that it may have something more to do with science than just a picture of an atom and some molecules and stuff like that. But really, that's all it is. If you get past all of that, it's still a decent operating system as long as all you want to do is your bare bones essentials. If you want to incorporate third-party repos, then you can, and then you can get something more functional for yourself and be able to do other things. But I always warn people, when you start going to third-party repositories that aren't sanctioned by the OS, then you're going to run into other issues, and then you're going to break stability even on any system. It's just not good practice. And it's also not good practice to mix and match software that you pulled in and compiled yourself with packages that you compile. You know, even on my Gentoo box, it's source based. But as soon as I saw that there was a simple screen recorder e-build with a portage overlay, I was able to install that, get that up and running, and utilize that. So it's now maintained through portage instead of having to deal with compiling it by hand and dealing with, if I update certain dependencies, does it break simple screen and I have to recompile it manually, etc., etc. I'm sorry it's a bad review again. I don't like to say negatives, but if you're looking for some positives about this, you know, it is stable, it is functional. The thing is, so is 90% of every Linux distribution over the last year that I have talked about and reviewed. If you really want to look at flexible, expandable Linux distributions, then don't come here. If you're looking for, this is a desktop that's stable, it feels to me 3 to 5 years old. It has actually it feels more like 2002, what I'm looking at right now with this development. It doesn't feel at all like 2014 the way it's built. The least they could have done was made it at least look sort of a little bit more of what all the other distros look like, instead of just leaving it with this, gee, I feel like I'm using my, you know, software from I got a 12-year-old laptop over there, and that's what I feel like I'm on my 4-year-old laptop here with the way the look and feel is. And unfortunately, changing some of the things like putting in Lancelot didn't do me any good because they don't have the newest features. Like normally I click on utilities and it would pull a menu over here, which is what I have with Gentoo. Instead it has the older style, which it just kind of pushes over, and I kind of even think this looks clunky. And doesn't really exactly work. And I don't blame Lancet on that. I blame the fact that Red Hat's using an old thing. And why can't I install FFmpeg? It's not in the main repository. FFmpeg, I know there's some talks about it being deprecated, but golly, Red Hat's so far behind the times, it'll be 2025 if FFmpeg got deprecated tomorrow before they really got rid of it out of their own repository. So don't tell me that. Why would they be up on the times on that, but be still running 4.3.4 here? Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I could yell and scream at this all day long. It drives me crazy. It's just absolutely nuts. So that's my timer. It tells me I should shut up, let you guys go. So anyway, if it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you enjoy it. Sorry for another rough video. If I have anything to say about this, I would say look elsewhere, keep on going. Check out some of my other reviews. I have some very good Debian-based distributions that I've looked at that are just as stable, and I personally would prefer anybody to consider that over Red Hat any day. Of course, you know my favorite, Gentoo. That's always my favorite. I always stick by it. Been using it for more than a decade. Well, pretty much since it almost came out. Anyway, y'all have a good one. We'll talk with you later. Bye, guys.